All right, hello everybody. Welcome to The Struggle Is Not Real, episode 13. But before we get into it, I got to explain why I'm wearing a pink shirt, because people not from Kentucky or not named Kristen Tabbert probably don't realize that today is a holiday in Louisville. It's Kentucky Oaks Day, the day before the Kentucky Derby. This is the day that the Phillies get to race. So the Phillies can race in the Kentucky Derby, but it's Phillies only in the Kentucky Oaks. And they do a big thing. It's all centered around the color pink. And they really moving cancer survivor parade, raise a lot of money for cancer research today. But I am not in Louisville. I'm in Lynchburg, Virginia. And we got Rocco here for prom. And it's going to be, so I'm here at Carl Miller Realty, where all three of us were here when they opened this building.
Like it was yesterday.
Yes, we were.
Yeah, now I'm here. So how are you guys doing, Michael?
I'm doing really well. I just getting very envious of all the people who live south of where I live, because it was in the 20s and 30s the last couple of days at night. So I'm ready for spring.
20s and 30s, really? Still?
Yeah.
Oh man, move back to Kentucky. All right.
Yeah, I'm coming back, Mike. Yeah, I'm moving to your
It was
basement.
in the 80s yesterday. I was last night. I was thinking about you because it was perfect cigar weather last night.
Oh, and now I'm really envious. We don't have good cigar stores up here, Mike.
Oh well, they're shipping. People do ship.
I have to ship. Yeah, I should.
Yeah.
But Kristen won't let me buy a whole carton of them. So,
how are you, Kristen?
I am good. I am looking forward to watching the races this weekend, as you can imagine. I wish I could be there in person, but I will not be.
I gotta admit, I got a little emotional this morning because I've been doing the sports media stuff for the Kentucky Derby since I don't even know. I think it's since 2011 was my first Derby as a media member, and this is the first. So this is the first Derby I've missed probably close to 25, 30. I've probably hit like 29 out of the last 30 at least. So. It's definitely one of those things where my world, if people don't realize, I used to be very involved with horse racing, had a horse racing podcast, did some work for ESPN radio around the big races. And I decided to give it up in the fall, Kristen, giving up the good to go for the great. Right. So, and the great is always like, it's not like you just give up the good and then the great just happens, right? It's a little bit of a process to get there. So I got a little, this was the first time this morning waking up when I normally would be going to the track where I was like, I'm kind of missing it. Yeah.
Relatable. I miss the day to day. I'm glad I'm still back in horse racing and the breeding side of the house, but boy, do I miss the day to day. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, any stories that you got about clients where you had to kind of give up the good or to go for the great? Like, I just think those things, like there's activities that we enjoy, right? There's activities that we enjoy that maybe don't always just serve us, or they're not congruent with where we want to go. And we just got to make some tough decisions sometimes. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, no, that sounds terrible, but I can't really think of anything that comes to mind. I mean, well, no, I don't think that's entirely true. We've talked about the chess player multiple times. He gave up the good. I mean, very, very, very lucrative practice, and he kind of let it become more passive to pursue wanting to become a grandmaster. And so, I mean, he, in his eyes, that was greatness. He'd achieved success in his practice, but his dream was to be truly great, to be truly prolific in the chess arena. So yeah, I think that story kind of transcends in a lot of different areas in a lot of different ways.
Well, today, though, we're talking about cost is not value, or value is not cost. How did I put it? I put cost is not value. And I typically give a really good historical perspective here. And I want to give a little bit more of a personal perspective, personal historical perspective. And I'm always reminded about this when I go to Italy. And when you go to Italy, you don't really have in a lot of ways, the middleman is cut out. Like if I want to go get some bread, I go to the bakery, I buy the bread right from the person who baked it. You know, uh, the fruit and vegetable stands, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, you get this trade-off. It kind of reminds me of like what it probably was like, you know, 1,000 years ago, where you had the person who made the thing and sold the thing, and the costs and value were probably a little bit more relatable right then. And then and it feels like all of these myths that we go over kind of tie back to something that happened in the Industrial Revolution. And this one's no different, right? I mean, we have the Industrial Revolution happens, things are able to be mass produced, they're able to be shipped across the world. And we see really the idea of how people started to compete on cost trickle into our society. So where this kind of goes with me is, you know, in 2008, I'm still a fairly new real estate agent, not as nearly as established yet. And you know, the market goes through its shift. We have the Great Recession comes into play, and immediately, anytime the market shifts in a way that where scarcity can kind of become the prevalent thought, then you see people making very scarce decisions. So, you know, back then we had almost a year of inventory, which is kind of hard for people to even think about, which means right now in Louisville, we've got in our MLS, we probably got like 2,400, 2,300 homes for sale. Back then, there was times when we had 14 to 17,000 homes for sale, which people, you know, probably couldn't even fathom. And then, you know, lo and behold, I'm a new agent, and I'm like, I'm at a place where the commission rate that I was going to charge was, you know, we were setting at a high standard. I was at a large brokerage. I had agents all around us that weren't with our brokerage, who were cutting their commission, cutting their fees, deciding to compete on cost and say, okay, like it's getting harder to get transactions. I'm going to go lower my fees. I'm going to go from, I can't talk percentages because of all the laws, but just, you all pretty much are familiar with that. And then I had other great agents who were very established at the brokerage I was at, who were charging the same thing I was charging. And I had to be able to compete with those people as well. And, you know, it was along that time that I met another who's become a friend of mine, but another New York Times bestselling author, a guy by the name of Bob Berg. I read The Go-Giver. And the law of The Go-Giver is to always provide more in value than you do in price. You know, always provide more value than you take in price. And, you know, basically make the decision to compete on value. Don't compete on cost. By compete on cost, you're basically, it's a race to the bottom. You know, you're never going to get out of that rat race. If you compete on value, you're just at a different standard. And so I went to work and I was like, okay, how am I going to compete to value? How am I going to be able to take my presentations and make sure that I'm articulating and demonstrating the value to my clients in both my buyer consultation and my seller consultation? And those things are still in place today. I mean, we still do a lot of those same value type statements in our consultations, and it never ceases to amaze me. And just this week, when I was doing the training with my agents on Tuesdays, and I told them, I was like, if you get someone who asks you to lower your commission, or will you do it for this percentage versus what you normally charge, understand that the question they're asking is, can you substantiate what it is that you're charging? Can you articulate and demonstrate the value that you're giving in order to do so? And I'm just going to tell you, like, when I made that distinction between value and cost, and I was able to articulate and demonstrate our value, that's when my business took off. That's when I started to see growth. Even with other people around me cutting their commission left and right, I was growing at huge rates, all the way to be one of the top people at the brokerage I was at, because, you know, we just made the decision to compete on value. So I hope I didn't just do the whole show right there, but that's my intro. And this one was personal for me. So Michael, anything kind of hit your head when I was talking about that?
Yeah. You know, that's a really interesting conversation, and I'm glad you started it that way. I think for me, cost and value isn't something that I've really spent a lot of time thinking about. Right. So this is kind of a new area for me to really kind of dig into. But, I was watching, this is going somewhere, but give me a minute. I got to set this up. Kristen has this show she's watching. I forget what it's called, but it's the guy that was in Mad Men. Kristen, what is the name of that show?
Neighbors, or Neighbors Next
whatever.
Door, something like that. John
Hamm.
Yeah,
he gets laid off, fired actually, and now he has all these really high costs, and so he turns into a neighborhood thief. I'm cutting to the chase if you haven't seen it. And then, so one of the things he steals is really high end jewelry that people, the people have a lot of it in their homes because he's in really high net worth homes, and so they don't notice if it's missing. Is his theory. So he steals this watch, right, and it's like $250,000 watch, and I know that those things exist, but I've been thinking about that. And what is the value of $250,000 watch? Watches have a purpose in life. They tell time, right? But is it worth $250,000 to know what time it is? No, right? So the value in that watch has got nothing to do with its functionality. It's got to do with what it represents and how it communicates something to people that if you don't have that watch, you can't communicate, right? So there's this thing of value that's really kind of hard to define, but it's got nothing to do with its functionality, right? I mean, it's perfect. It's probably a perfect watch, but that idea that the value of something can increase based upon how much you had to pay for it in some ways, even though the intrinsic value isn't that high. And that's where I went with what you said and what I was thinking about. It's not quite the same thing, but it's an interesting concept about value because, value is like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Because I would never, even if I had the money and I wanted to show off, I'm not buying a $250,000 watch. Just ain't
your wife would not let you.
Well, I think when I hear you talk about that, I think about the cars that real estate agents drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, and I think sometimes it can backfire for you. Sometimes it depends on how you line up your value statement with how you outwardly express your brand. Right. So in my case, like, I don't understand spending $80,000 on a car that I'm going to put 20 to 25,000 miles on every year. Right? Like, I'm driving this car into the ground. I want a reliable car. It's got to look good, whatever else. I'm not going to drive around a beater, except for, well, not anymore since my car accident. I guess I got a loaner car right now. But the idea for me was like, I want something that's reliable, something that's very pragmatic and efficient. And fits our brand, right? If I was only working with luxury homes, well, then I probably would have to have a different vehicle, right? I'd have to present myself differently. Right. But then at the same time, I had one person who was, I'm not going to say what they were selling, but they pulled up in one of our clients' houses in a very nice car, and it kind of turned my client off. Like my client felt like, well, I was paying for that lifestyle versus so it was a really interesting kind of things of how we communicate that kind of stuff, just by what we wear, how we present ourselves, what we drive, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I
think value is contextual, right? So like you just said, if I was selling a house for $750,000 and the guy comes up in a, Bentley, I'm thinking, okay, I'm probably paying too much for this guy. On the other hand, if I'm in LA and I'm in those, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars homes, and he drives a Bentley, oh, this guy's good because he's got
not high enough end.
Yeah, maybe it's not. Maybe the Bentley is not the right, unless it's got the 12-cylinder. But that whole value is contextual thing is an interesting concept.
We haven't heard from Kristen yet, so I'm gonna let her talk. But I want to kind of build off that a little bit too. Go ahead, Kristen.
Well, you guys, like with the watch episode or example you were talking about, there's the tangible and the intangible. The value of the watch can be measured based on, the price, but the intangible is the brand name that goes along with it. And to what you said too, is not just the brand name that for the watchmaker, but there's the value that it adds to the person that wears the watch. And so value can't always be measured either. It can be more feelings based. So when we start talking about those kinds of things, there's some real cautions I think we have to talk about, in that, you can't just get hung up on delivering the most value, because thinking that you're delivering the most value may set you back in other areas of, execution, some things like that. You have to make sure that you're not just focusing so much on the value you're trying to deliver that you're not consistently executing on high value activities to generate the results you're hoping to generate.
Yeah. So go ahead, Mike. You had some. I like what you said, Kristen. You have some thoughts, and I want to follow up on what you just said, Kristen, because I think that's interesting.
Well, you go ahead and follow up on Kristen's thing because I don't want to derail this. I can take this in a whole different.
Well, actually, I was following up on both of you guys, and so I'm still writing down my thoughts. So
okay. Well, if you want me to go, I will.
Yeah, go ahead, and I got to think about it a second.
I continually am now thinking about like when we list a house. Okay, we talk about constantly how important the very first impressions really are, and this is the same thing. If I'm a real estate agent or I'm a business owner and whatever else. If most of us know that if we pull up to a restaurant and it looks like the hole in wall, it's usually really good cooking. But I think the reality of it is like the way that your client feels from the very first time that they perceive any sense of what you stand for, and that either happens when they enter a store, how you answer the phone, when they first see you drive up, when they first meet you in person, what you're wearing, whatever else. You're setting the stage for something that you've got to figure out if you can overcome or if you're not going to be able to overcome, right? So I'm setting the stage when you come in the office, I think you all actually, it would be interesting to hear how well we do it. Although it does take me back to when we were in this office, and Kristen and Michael, who were buyer clients of mine, and then they chose to work with another agent to sell her house. It was my wife. I'm just joking.
She's much better. The second agent was so much better.
Much better. We were here, and Michael and Kristen did not get onboarded the way that our typical clients do, and so we're doing this whole thing at this real estate office that we're at right now, and one of our other friends is doing this whole presentation on the buyer consultation. I see Michael and Kristen both pull out notepads and start taking notes. I was mortified. So maybe you guys aren't the right people to ask for this one. But I think at the end of the day, like you've got to figure out exactly how you're going to communicate value. If you're going to compete on value, every single piece of how you're communicating value from the first interaction a client has is going to make a difference. So with a house, if they pull up to a house and there's chipped paint and wood rot on the front door and whatever else, they're like, oh man, what's wrong with this place? And the place could be pristine inside and they're still looking for what's wrong with it because of the first impression. Mm-hmm. Versus if you landscape and everything's freshly painted and there's a welcome mat and, it's a real warm feeling. They open the door and, it's light and airy, like, they'll be like, they could come across a problem and be like, oh, that's no big deal. We can work with that. Yeah. And those first impressions lining up with your value and how you're going to compete, extremely important. So,
well, Mike, it goes even beyond that. It goes to the photos. Because remember when we were looking at our houses, you said, look, I couldn't find what I wanted. And you said, we're just going to do an exercise. I want you to pick 5. We're not going to buy any of these, but we're going to, and I could pick 4 from the MLS that, the 15 that you sent us, and I couldn't come up with the 5th one. And you were like, well, you have to pick one. So I picked one that I thought I hated more than any of the others on the thing, right? Because the pictures so many things about the pictures and the descriptions just didn't speak to me. And then lo and behold, what happened?
That's the one you bought.
I told you I didn't even want to go to it. I said, why waste our time? Can we just go on to the next one? You're like, nope, we're going through with the process. And so we did, and we walked in the door and it was like, oh, long story short, audience, it was my dream home. I didn't know it.
Well, you had a value filter, and it was, our first house was in a subdivision. And every house after that was on its own piece of land, had horse property on it. I mean, every one of our houses after that had room for your horses, right? And so that was the first time we moved into something that was back to where we started. And I think that was part of the problem, is we didn't really want to go back into I'm going to date myself, the Peyton Place subdivision kind of environment. And but it turned out that wasn't what it was. And, but we had this filter about what was valuable, what wasn't. And Mike was right. I hate to say that, but he was right.
Mike's always right. And now I learned later that when Mike sits on a couch, he knows he's going to sell that house.
Because he told you all that story too.
She told me your secret.
At the whole thing about the pictures though is exactly right too. I mean, and so when I get and it's something we have to fight, because either if someone says, "Hey, I saw the pictures. This is my house. I'm buying this house," 0% chance they're buying that house. Because the house itself will never live up to the pictures that they saw online, and they're always going to that situation disappointed.
Yes.
And so this goes back even further about not making sure that your value that you're displaying, even before words come out of your mouth, doesn't set a bar so high that you can't live up to. Right. So that goes back to the thing we talked about. This guy, pulls in someone's driveway to do work at someone's house, and they're driving a really nice car. You better be able to demonstrate why that value is there for you. Right. So, and normally it's getting our buyers to understand how to look at pictures and realize, okay, these are professional photos or non-professional photos. If they're non-professional photos, how do I get an idea of what the space looks like so that I can start to see this with a different lens and not compare this house with professional photos to this house without professional photos and still end up. Now, usually the house without professional photos, you got a pretty good chance of getting a deal. I mean, if you're not getting the deal typically on the house that has really nice photos.
Right.
So you guys brought something interesting up, and Michael, you termed it the value filter. So I want to pose a question to you guys as we're talking about things, as you're examining stuff through this value filter. What happens if your initial value proposition out of the gate, the value that shows up that you're bringing, is so exceptionally high, and the person receiving that value has misunderstood or hinges hopes and dreams and everything else on it, like you're going to be the magic that's going to solve all their problems? What happens when you come out so high like that, and then the person realizes it's not your value that's the problem, it's they can't deliver on how to utilize that we the best? And then, am I making sense?
I mean, your all situation's not different. When we sold your house, I'll put the we in there. It didn't go exactly as planned.
Nope.
It actually went the way it needed to go, but it didn't go exactly as planned. But we don't necessarily, we talk about what our normal actions are, and then we talk about what happens with your particular property as it relates. And I don't think, especially in Chrissy's way, like she sets a promise of exactly what's going to happen. But what she does is she's making sure that what you're saying is they overpromise and underdeliver.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can underpromise. You always want to try to underpromise and overdeliver, but you got to promise enough to win the business in the first place.
Track. Yeah, it's a fine line.
And then you got to then make sure that if you promise something and then the process maybe takes a little bit longer or whatever else, then in Chrissy's case, I would think you always say that she communicates with you guys extremely well throughout the process. So you overcome that stuff by
best agent I ever had communicating with me.
Oh, she was amazing.
That's how you overcome it, right? In the real estate world, you've got to communicate. And I make my dad joke at my meetings, and everyone, it takes a long time. It's like, we're going to communicate with you weekly, WEEKLY, and not WEAKLY.
I like that.
And because the greatest fear of a real estate client is that they're going to communicate weekly with the A and not weekly with the E.
Right. And by the way, Mike, you were excellent too. I play around, but just so you're clear, Mike's a great realtor.
And I hope
there's a reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. She's
well, I hope my question didn't make you think that I was pointing fingers at you, because the example was one that was actually that
I would just say that I thought your example was I didn't think you were pointing fingers at me because you're still talking to us. But we've had two two of our roughest transactions have been with people that we're the closest with. One of them just closed last week. Another one, the family of 4 had to be homeless for a week. And I was talking to someone about this actually today on the phone, Kristen. I'm sorry, I'm sucking the air out of this call today. But in real estate specifically, like if the transaction goes exactly how it's supposed to go, it's really hard to demonstrate your value. You really, every single time that there is an issue or a problem, it gives us an opportunity to demonstrate our value.
Yeah. So Mike, you can
the value wasn't,
because tool-wise, all realtors have pretty much the same tools in their toolboxes, right? You've got, I'm just saying,
we utilize them differently. Yes.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, what differentiates an exceptional realtor from somebody who just put the listing on the market, got it sold, moved you out, and moved you along, right? It's that value that you bring to the table.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and the value is a counselor. I mean, so I just mean to cut you off, Mike, but we hire you because you have your expertise. And, yet if sometimes people have the temptation just always to agree with the client, okay, we'll do all this. And you had to confront us about what we were looking for in the price range you were in and what was really available. And you were very generous. Let us look at what we wanted to look at, but you had to advise us. And sometimes the advice is not what you want to hear. And it turned out it was exactly the right advice because we were really, really happy with that place. But that ability to know when to say no, because you're so sure of the value you're creating, you've got that confidence. Because I think there's sometimes when people pretend they have more value than they really have, they doubt their own value. And that's when they drop their prices. That's when they're saying yes to everything. And they're working twice as hard as they need to. Being able to establish the value and sticking with having this, I got to read the right word. I got politically correct. Having the courage to stick with your value offer, even when the client doesn't seem to want it. Because that's what you deliver. If they're not a good fit, that's fine. Go somewhere else. But this is how I help people. And I think that's the courage and being certain. You have to, first of all, believe you're bringing the value. Because you can say I bring this value, but if you don't believe it, you're just going to drop your price. You're going to collapse. It's the belief in yourself and the value you bring, understanding it, and then you bring the client to your place. You don't move to where the client is, right? Because I think
I can tell you definitively when I've had conversations with people who were looking to hire me, and it's been a question of cost, and I think that they have real potential, and so let's do a favor, let's discount. I can
never works out, does it?
100% of the time it's not worked out. 100% of the time.
They're paying what they want from you. Yeah, they're not paying for what you're really able to give them. Yeah,
exactly.
The last thing that I just on that point though, if you really want to demonstrate your value in the process when it's not going well, like when you make a mistake and you own up the mistake and you respond to the mistake the right way, there's probably no better way to demonstrate your value than how you respond to a mistake. Right. I don't think anyone expects us to be perfect. Like we all make mistakes. We all screw up from time to time. But there's magic in how you respond and how you react to your mistake if you do it the right way.
Yep. As soon as I make one, I'll take that under advisement.
What fantasy world are you living in, Bruno?
I'm just playing. Everybody knows I'm just playing. They know me.
Any other parting words on this before we go today?
I think, for me, and Kristen, I know you want to say something. The communication of value through things like pricing and other things is important. But I think, we are unconscious of most of the things that we do from moment to moment. And I think it's important in communicating value to be really conscious of how you say things, what you say, what you do, how you follow up. And, that process of what is my value proposition? What is it why are they paying me money? Right? Why is they willing to exchange money for me? And what is exactly that stuff? And then being consistent and integrous with that promise, because it's easy to promise stuff, but it's easy to not be integrous with it because you're not conscious of it. And I think it takes some work to have a value offer that you deliver consistently over time to everybody that works with you.
A lot of entrepreneurs don't even take the time to understand and make sure that their value proposition, what they deliver, and what they're charging actually matches up. And if your value proposition is to be the cheapest, go be the cheapest. What do you say, Michael? All models are broken, some are useful.
Yep.
Right. Like
I
there's
didn't
1,000
coin
ways to
it,
skin
but
this
I
cat.
use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Say that again now. I missed it because I was yakking.
I said there's 1,000 ways to skin this cat. You can always, but you just got to make sure it's all lining up.
Yeah.
Kristen.
Yeah, I think, we want to encourage everybody to think about what their value is, assess what they believe their value is, or how much value they want to grow into, so to speak. But I also want to caution people not to over rationalize the value to just metrics alone. You have to consider the tangibles and the intangibles. So that's my 2 cents.
Right.
Can I one more thing, Mike, real quickly? I know. Okay.
No, just go ahead.
So I signed up for a pre-publication copy of Click, which is a book by Jake Knapp. I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, but in this book, they have this what they call a founder's sprint when they're going to try to get funding for an idea, business idea. And they have this thing that they call I'm sort of just jumping this real quick. It's called the founding hypothesis, and it's got 4 blanks, and it's this: if we help who, and so solve what problem with the solution that we have, they will choose it over who are my competitors, and because our solution is these things. So it's a really cool little way to really define your value proposition, to understand what it is you're selling in the marketplace, because it's easy enough to be anything. I could be a consultant, I could be a realtor, car salesman, but if I've thought through that, then I'm going to attract the right clients, I'm going to serve them better, and I'm going to deliver on this big promise for the right price. And I think that so I strongly recommend, if you haven't seen it yet, to buy Click, because it's a great way to think through that.
Is it out? So is it out yet, or
I think it's out. I think you can buy it now. I pre-ordered it, but it's out though.
I tell my clients this all the time. You fill in the blanks. I am, fill in your name. I help, fill in the blank. To do, fill in the blank. By, doing, fill in the blank.
They stole your stuff, dude.
They did. I've been doing this for decades.
There's no original ideas out there. You guys know that. It's all just packaged a little differently. So, all right. Great show today. We only got 3 of these left. The next episode, we're going to be talking about how the early bird doesn't always get the worm.
We have 2 left. This was 13.
But I think we got 14, 15, and 16. Was I wrong on that? Maybe.
Do we have a 16?
So none of your values are as mathematicians.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. We have 14 and 15 because after that we have 2 left. The last one will be Kristen's favorite, because we're going to do the problem is not the problem. And it's been something I've been thinking about a lot lately. So anyway, early bird doesn't always get the worm. That's going to be next week, and we will see you then. Take care, everybody.
Bye, buddy.